All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today on our bonus CASI quarterly training. Today's focus is on non-classroom based charter schools, with a focus on with the moratorium ending, kind of what are they, define what non-classroom based charter schools are, kind of their basic operations, how they're different from classroom based charters, and just some next steps from there. All right. Go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about CASI. CASI stands for the Charter Authorizer Support Initiative, which is a collaborative between the California Department of Education's CDE's Charter Schools Division and the following LEAs: Los Angeles County Office of Education, LACO, San Diego Unified School District, San Diego Unified SUSD, Santa Clara County Office of Education, SCCOE. Sorry, I'm trying to read everything on the slides as I've been told to do, to support professional development and networking opportunities for charter school authorizers. This work is funded through the Public Charter Schools Grant Program authorized under Title IV, Part C of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act. And you can see all those citations right there. My name is Joanne. I am representing for San Diego Unified, and some of the other folks in our office will also be presenting today. Some of the CASI offerings, we offer quarterly trainings such as this one. We also do monthly charter chats. The February one is coming up soon. We also offer one-on-one technical support, on-site trainings, mentoring program, and charter school authorizing and oversight 101 conference presentations. So if you need any support with any of the information shared today or any other aspects of your work as a charter authorizer, please feel free to reach out. We are more than happy to help. For more information about all of the presentation offerings and different CASI offerings, you can go to the CDE CASI website link here, and you will see a list and also an archive of past trainings. Our caveat for today is the information contained in this presentation is provided as a reference only. Charter schools and chartering authorities are encouraged to review the laws and regulations and consult with their own legal counsel regarding the application to their specific situations. So again, just brief introductions here. We have three main offices presenting as part of CASI. So we have San Diego Unified, Santa Clara County, and Los Angeles County Office of Ed. And our roadmap for today, so these are just a brief overview of the topics that we'll be covering. We're going to spend some time doing definitions and terms, funding determinations for non-classroom based charters, what does effective monitoring of non-classroom charters look like, reviewing new petitions for non-classroom based charters, CCAP, which is the California Charter Authorizing Professionals Group, their research and collaboration opportunity, some lessons learned, and closing our session for today. And today we're going to be really using the Q&A feature of the Zoom. So if you don't see Q&A on your bottom bar of Zoom, if you hit those three dots in the circle, the More button, you should be able to see you should be able to see the Q&A feature there, but we'll be using that in order to review and put a bunch of questions together for a research page. So please ask your questions using the Q&A feature. A research page featuring frequently asked questions will be sent to all participants after this presentation. All right. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Deidre Walsh, who will review some definitions and terms related to non-classroom based programs.
I think, Tiffany, was this your section?
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so it's going to be a lot of information today, and we really wanted to start at the beginning because we understand that there is a wide range of understanding of what non-classroom based schools are. So we're going to start at the beginning and just define them and work our way through. So some of you may be very familiar with non-classroom based, and some of you may just be beginning to understand what they are. So if we start with California Education Code section 47612.5. This defines non-classroom based NCB as instruction that includes, but is not limited to, independent study, home study, work study, and distance and computer-based education. So for purposes of funding, a charter school is considered NCB if less than 80% of its average daily attendance, so the ADA, is classroom-based. And this will require a non-classroom-based determination of funding. Now, that was a lot of words, so we're going to break some of those down so that we're all on the same page. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. So this is a non-classroom based school. Again, these are the Ed Code sections 51744 through 51749.6. So any charter school in which more than 20% of instruction is offered in an alternative setting to the traditional classroom. So anything that's happening outside of a student being inside of that classroom brick and mortar building, if it's more than 20%, that would be considered a non-classroom based setting. So that's home study, asynchronous, independent study, internship, remote, distance learning, project-based that's not on campus, and any combination of these items. So this could look different in one program. So one program that is a K through 8 could have a student that attends 4 days a week for 4 hours at a classroom site, receiving direct instruction from a credentialed teacher in both math and English, and then spends the other part of their instruction at home working asynchronously on independent study, and maybe on Fridays does group work on a project-based learning project with other peers at a different location. And maybe in the same program, an 8th grader just comes in once a week to do synchronous learning with a group of students in math for 2 hours once a week, and the rest of the time is spent working asynchronously at home on a online program, distance learning. So there are a variety of ways that non-classroom based learning can look even within one school program. Now, many of these terms can be tricky, so we'll go on to the next slide of tricky terms. Remembering that the umbrella that we're starting with is non-classroom based. So that's more than 20% of instruction is offered in an alternative setting. So keeping that in mind, many people are throwing around terms like independent study. So that's work that students do independently according to a written agreement and under the general supervision of a credentialed teacher. And that part is important, credentialed teacher. Online or virtual program, there's actually no specific definition in Ed Code, but it does appear in the Title 5 of California Code of Regulations, the CCR, section 11963.5. A virtual or online charter school is one in which at least 80% of teaching and pupil interaction occurs via the internet. So a lot of percentages here, but that means that 80% of the time, the student does not face-to-face see an instructor or a teacher. So that is the definition currently, not in Ed Code, but in the Code of Regulations of a virtual program. Many programs include a virtual aspect or an online aspect, but it only is defined as completely virtual if it's more than 80%. Distance learning is a term that was used in COVID legislation, meaning instruction in which the pupil and instructor are in different locations. And it can be in a variety of different manners as well. It can be synchronous learning where the students all log in at one time and receive instruction from their credentialed teacher, or they could be working asynchronously or in small groups being led by an instructor. And there's a few more tricky terms on the next page. And this one might be a little bit controversial. But there is home study and homeschool, which people tend to use interchangeably. But really, there is a definition for each of those. Home study does appear under independent study in the Ed Code, and that is a publicly funded instruction through a charter school where parents and guardians may educate their children at home with state oversight requirements. And usually that's with the support of credentialed charter school teachers. Homeschooling is usually where parents and guardians opt out of public school to privately educate or homeschool their children. So that's different. So for the purpose of this presentation today, we'll be using home study, not homeschool. And I understand that many programs use those terms interchangeably, but today we'll just use home study. Hybrid is a term that appears in Ed Code section 51744, but is not formally defined. In practice, hybrid typically refers to programs that combine in-person classroom instruction with independent study. And we talked about that a little bit earlier about a student that might go to the classroom to receive direct instruction for a specific subject, but then do other subjects at home independently and asynchronously. And there might be a mix of that as the student changes subjects and needs more support in certain areas. Or when they take their science classes, all of those labs might occur on the campus with other students. Flex-based is a term most recently used in the introduction of Senate Bill 414 in 2025 as a replacement for non-classroom based. So these would be interchangeable terms. It's not an actual term yet. It has not been approved, so it's not in Ed Code yet, but some people are starting to use this term flex-based. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. The CDE reports, this is a few non-classroom based data points, that the CDE reports that as of August 5th, 2025, 310 charter schools currently have a non-classroom based funding determination, which is approximately 24% of charter schools in California. So today we're using that non-classroom based funding determination to decide how many schools that there are. Of those charter schools, 169 self-report as exclusively or primarily online or virtual. And that source is the Public Schools and Districts Data Files, County District School Administration, CDE, which is a great resource, has lots of data. If you want to check that out, it's very interesting. So I think we'll go ahead and move on now to the very important funding determination. Rick, I will throw that to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Faraci from San Diego Unified School District Program Manager. Here to chat with you a little bit about the funding determination. So funding determination is where all those definitions that we just chatted about turn into dollars. It's kind of the connection between how non-classroom based program is designed and how it gets funded by the state. So non-classroom based funding determinations pursuant to Ed Code section 47612.5. To obtain a funding determination, a charter school must submit a request for a determination of funding to the California State Board of Education for approval. To request a determination of funding, the school must complete the funding determination form. The form is now fully online and available at CDE. There's the link right there, non-classroom-based determination of funding. So I like to look at the form to see what these schools are filling out and see what they're actually saying on their application. So the CDE reviews all the funding determination requests and presents the requests and its recommendations to the Advisory Commission on Charter Schools, ACCS, and the State Board of Education. So it's important to remember that only the State Board of Education approves the funding determination. However, during the process, authorizers often do get contacted during the process. So length of funding determination. Funding determination requests may be approved for a period of 2 to 5 years. The CD's current practice is to recommend approvals between 2 and 4 years based on the number of years a charter school has been in operation and the number of times it has obtained a funding determination. So in the past, the CD recommended 5 years periods depending on the charter school's academic performance index rank. However, because API is no longer calculated, the CD does not currently recommend 5-year funding determination periods. So here's a nice chart on non-classroom based funding determination levels. So in order to be funded at 100% ADA, 100% funding for the ADA, 85 or 70%, charter schools must meet the following 3 criteria shown in the chart. Funding levels reflect spending priorities and staffing. Dropping below these thresholds will reduce or deny funding. So funding determination of schools are based on schools' total expenditures for certificated employees, salaries, and benefits, and instruction and related services. Again, per regulations, charter schools may be approved by the SBE to receive 100% funding for their non-classroom based 88, 85, or 70%, or if they're denied, then they'll get 0% funding. So if we look at the chart, to receive 100% funding, they need to spend at least 40% of its revenues on instructional or certificated salaries and benefits. And the total revenue does include restricted revenue. Nope, go back. Also need to spend 80% of its revenues on instruction-related services. And so to maintain a pupil-teacher ratio of 25-1, so they have to maintain that ratio, or equivalent to the pupil's full-time certificated employees for all other educational programs operated in the largest unified school district in the county. So that's that could be a little ambiguous. So next. So calculating non-classroom based ratio. The CD provides a detailed instruction for calculating the ratios at that link. Under the current regulations, charter schools may use one of the 2 methods for computing ADA ratios. They may follow instructions for a school district using the base unified school district with the greatest ADA in the county or counties in which the charter school operates, or they may use a fixed pupil certificated employee ratio of not more than 25-1, and that is the option that's mostly used is the 25-1. The ratio calculation is based on the charter school's prior P2 apportionment data. State review of non-classroom based funding process. So there was a review by the Legislative Analyst Office, LAO, and the Financial Crisis and Management Assistance Team, FICMAT, review, which was called the Review of the Funding Determination Process for Non-Classroom Based Charter Schools, and it was done February 29, 2024, and there's a link to that report. It's really fascinating reading. So the report has some base recommendations highlighted here. Define non-classroom based as a school where less than half the instruction, not less than 80% occurs in person. To open up the realm of what non-classroom based is actually defined as. Aligned SBE funding determinations to charter school renewal periods. So if they have a 5-year renewal, to have the funding determination go along with that 5-year renewal. And also require authorizers to track expenditures and staffing data separately for non-classroom based charter schools. To track them a little bit differently. So fiscal oversight process. Yes.
Before you move on, I just wanted to say that we bring this up just because this would include more duties for authorizers. So these are things that could be on the horizon. So just understanding how non-classroom based funding works now and how it may evolve and how authorizers may play a role in monitoring that non-classroom based funding as well.
So the fiscal oversight process. How do we conduct fiscal oversight for non-classroom based and independent study? There is no legal or formal role for charter school authorizers in the funding determination process. However, it is important for authorizers to be knowledgeable about how non-classroom-based charters are funded, as they provide oversight for the fiscal health of their approved charter schools. The CDE Charter Schools Division, CSD, may reach out to the charter school authorizer during the funding determination process and conduct fiscal oversight the same as you would classroom-based charter schools. So why is it kind of important to know that? Because so the funding base is all based on documentation. So charter oversight is kind of where the documentation gets tested. So although we don't approve the funding determination as authorizers, we should oversee the consequences of it since there is funding involved.
So I think that somewhat answers Barbara's question in the chat. It says, are we able to receive these slides? But yes, they'll be out next week. It sounds like it suggested that the authorizer monitors these percentages. Is this in the horizon, but not necessarily for this current year? Right. Currently, authorizers aren't required to monitor the percentages necessarily, but you are looking to monitor and be fiscally aware of where those percentages stand, and especially um, the cost for I can't think of the word that I want to use here, the instructional and certificated staff. If it's really low, then you know that there could be an issue. And I know it's always a little bit confusing, this 40 and 80%, which adds up to 120, but the 40% is part of the 80 that is spent on instruction and related services. So mostly that's the thing that we're looking for, is that at least 40% of the budget is used for certificated staff and benefits, and it's not difficult to meet that mark. Other than that, there is no role right now for authorizers in managing that percentage. So hopefully that answers your question. And then just as a reminder, if you have additional questions, please put them in the Q&A. And as we're going, Joanne is able to answer those. And if we're not able to answer them on the spot, we will after the presentation for sure. We know that this is a lot of information too. So if you need us to expand on anything, you can let us know that as well in the chat or in the Q&A, and we can set up an additional training or come to you and do an on-site training at your district, or set up a webinar specifically for your county or your district to give you additional information. Okay. So moving on to effective monitoring. So far, we have reviewed tricky terms, so you know what non-classroom-based charter schools are when you see them, and you know what the funding determination is. So we have the charter school, they have their funding determination. So let's move on to being able to monitor them. So the non-classroom-based oversight process. First and foremost, I would familiarize yourself with the audit guide section on independent study, which is different or in addition to the rest of the charter school section. That is the 25-26 audit guide link there. You can also just Google California K-12 schools audit, and you'll be able to find that section. Attend board meetings, whether it's virtual or in person. Ensure that NCBA schools are still following the same Brown Act requirements, still bringing their LCAP forward, their budgets, everything is still accessible and following Brown Act and Roberts rules. Should be the same as any other charter school. Conduct site visits. Even if they're entirely virtual, site visits still need to happen so that you know that students attend there, that there are actual teachers employed there. Interview parents, interview teachers, interview any other educational partners that helps you understand how the school works, what a school day looks like for different aged or different grade levels of students. Request the school's independent study policy, master agreements, and work samples. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail in the next few slides. And then also review fiscal, operational, educational programs, just as you would for traditional seat-based programs. It may just have a different look to how you do that. And then on the next page is the independent study policy must include. So when doing effective monitoring, you want to be looking at the independent study, the master agreement, and the work samples that go together to make that work product and complete master agreement for the student to be an independent study. So I'm going to quickly review these and then we'll talk about it on like the third slide. The CDE Guide to Independent Study is a great resource too for everything you need to know about independent study, and it's the last link on this slide. But the independent study must include a statement that participation in independent study is voluntary. General student data, including the name, address, grade level, school of enrollment, and program placement. A level of satisfactory education progress, number of missed assignments before an evaluation to determine if the student should remain in independent study, the maximum length of time by grade level between the time an assignment is made and the date the assignment must be completed. Current independent study agreement for each student containing all required elements as provided in Ed Code Section 51747G and Ed Code Section 51749.6. And there are several items that are required in the master agreement, and that is on the next slide. That master agreement must include the time, manner, frequency, and place for the student to submit their assignments. So is this going to be online? Are they need to submit assignments in person? How does this work at this particular non-classroom based school? What are the objectives and the methods of study and evaluation, materials and personnel which will be available to the student? The duration of the independent study agreement, is it for the full year? Is it only for a semester? The dates should be on the agreement somewhere. A statement of the number of credits or courses or elementary grades which will be completed by the independent study agreement. And again, a statement also in the contract that participation in independent study is voluntary. Next about the contracts, and this piece is important and auditable, is these contracts must be created prior to the start of independent study. They must be signed by the student, the parent, the certificated employee responsible for the supervision of the independent study, and then all persons who have direct responsibility for providing assistance to the student. And that line is usually signed by the ed specialist or sometimes OT or the speech language pathologist, anyone that works on a regular basis with that student.
And then
Now,
if we could pause, we have a good question in the chat about what would a site-based visit look like for a virtual non-classroom based school, or any suggestions on what that could look like?
Sure. I think that you could set up the site-based, or I'm sorry, you could set up a completely virtual site visit by asking for the schedule of students depending on what the virtual program looked like. So some virtual programs do have synchronous learning where students come to meet with teachers at a certain time. So you would ask for the login so that you're able to come and join that class. If they have one-on-one sessions or they have group sessions, you could get permission to join one of those sessions as well. I would interview a group of teachers together. You can do that virtually. That way you get an idea from all of them about how the program works. You can interview parents, either in a group or separately, about how their child attends, what it looks like day to day. That way you can compare how everybody interacts with that particular school program. And then I would still review all of the same documents that you would review at a regular site-based site visit as well. So that would, be LCAP, finances, suicide prevention plan, any of those documents that you might ensure that the school has. Does anybody have any additional things that they do for virtual programs when they do virtual visits that you want to throw into the chat? Any ideas? I think meeting with board members can be important too. Of course, less than a quorum to ensure that they understand that this is an independent study this is a non-classroom based program, and that they understand how the funding works.
We have a couple suggestions in the chat. So dropping in on learning sessions, getting the back office Zoom access, uh, observing instruction.
Many completely virtual programs do have times where they have everyone come together for certain things like testing or field trips or activities. So you could find days where groups of students come together and be able to come on site wherever that might happen, so that you get an idea of how the staff members interact with students in that way as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep going so we might be able to get to having a breakout session today. So I continue to roll on with the independent study policy versus the master agreement. You want to make sure that they are both in agreement so that they are both saying the same thing. Do both the independent study policy and the master agreement include a statement that independent study is voluntary? Is the information provided about opportunities for live interaction and synchronous learning? Is the master agreement fully executed? Does it have all the required signatures? Many times people say, but this is a kindergartner, this is a first grader. Do they really need to sign the agreement? Yes, it's in Ed Code that signatures need to be there for students. They can put an X, a mark, a happy face, whatever it might be. Students do need to sign their master agreements. Are they signed prior to the first day ADA was claimed? And this is definitely something that you can look at. When was it signed? When did the student begin? When was ADA claimed? Cross-reference the independent study policy with the master agreement. So for example, if the independent study policy says the maximum length of time between the time an assignment is made and the date the assignment must be completed is 20 days, does the master agreement say this too? So everything should match. Without these items in place, the school may have not just an audit finding, but many audit findings, which would lead to a reduction in funding and, also cause other complications with compliance. So they want to make sure that all of these pieces are in place. This is a new part of non-classroom based and independent study. This is the independent study re-engagement process. It's in Ed Code section 51747. It's a result of all of the independent study during COVID. So if students are not generating attendance for more than 10% of the required instruction over 4 continuous weeks, they miss more than 50% of scheduled synchronous instruction time in a month or by grade span, or violate the independent study agreement, then the LEA must verify the current contact information for each student, notify parents or guardians within 1 school day of non-attendance or lack of participation, create an outreach plan from the school to determine the student's needs, including connection with health and social services as necessary, and meet with student, parent, educator to review the independent study agreement and reconsider independent study programs' impact on the pupil's achievement and well-being. Now, this is not to say that you are making sure that every student, that they are monitoring which students are at 50% in 4 weeks and 10%. And I know there's a lot of numbers going on here, but you do want to ensure that both teachers and administrators understand that if students are not performing or they're violating the independent study agreement or not participating in synchronous learning, then they have a plan. Not only do they have a plan, but they have all the contact information for the students. They have a system in which to notify parents. They've created that outreach plan and they can explain it to you. They have a way in which to meet with parents. Do they do that online? Do they meet with parents weekly? So they should be able to explain how this re-engagement process works. And the next slide. This is the independent study interaction process. So LEAs are required to provide synchronous instruction and live interaction opportunities pursuant to Ed Code sections 51747E and 51749.5A4C as follows. So this is the minimum day interaction requirements. At each grade level, it has a different requirement for live interaction and synchronous instruction opportunities. So the difference here is that live interaction is just a touch base. So even a phone call from the clerk or the registrar saying, hey, it looks like you haven't logged in today, or we thought you were coming into the classroom, or we had you going to this field trip, but you didn't show up. That's live interaction. An email exchange where someone at the school site emails and the student emails back, that's considered live interaction. That can happen with any staff member, and that works. The synchronous instruction is required to be with a credentialed staff member. And so both of these are supposed to be tracked. So the school needs to have a method to track both synchronous learning and live interaction, because this can be used as part of their ADA. So you want to make sure that the school has a tracking system. And so you can see here for grade levels TK through 3, live interaction should be daily, synchronous opportunities should be daily, grades 4 through 8, live interaction daily, synchronous instruction opportunities weekly. And then Ed Code is silent for grades 9 through 12 on live interaction, but the synchronous instruction should be weekly.
And then Tiffany, we have another question in the chat about the previous slide. To what degree is this information a condition of apportionment?
Of apportionment, it is not. It just could. You're just ensuring that students are getting some kind of re-engagement, that they're enrolled in a program where they're getting instruction and have some sort of contact with the school. So if the non-classroom based program does not have any sort of re-engagement plan, then sometimes students end up enrolled in a school where they don't complete any credits and don't receive any instruction, and the school doesn't ever contact them. So that's what we're trying to avoid here.
All right, and then we have another question regarding, so how much of this is already audited by the independent auditor for the charter school, and should the authorizing district be duplicating these?
That is a great question. So a lot of it is already looked at by the auditor, and we know that some of even more looks like it will be in the audit guide in the future. If the trailer bill goes through, then there may be additional audit items in there. But just a reminder that the audit is lagging, right? It's not in real time. That is in the past. It's already happened. So some of these things we'd like to shore up as they're happening. So if you find a school that isn't completing master agreements, or a school that has an enrollment of 200 students, but only 3 full-time FTE, well, obviously that ratio is off. You can't just have 3 full-time teachers and 200 students. That wouldn't work out for the non-classroom based funding determination. So you immediately can, start asking questions and ask for financials to figure out how that works. So, I would suggest doing that before, 18 months down the line when you find out about the audit from the previous year. Does that answer that question?
We have another question. Could you speak to the best practice on the amount of time offered for synchronous instruction? For example, what if a charter offers 15 to 30 minutes of weekly synchronous instruction for high school students?
I cannot, because EdCode is silent on that. And so we don't have any guidance on what synchronous learning should look like at each grade level. I can tell you that the more that there is, the students are more successful. I understand that many schools offer it and students don't take the opportunity, so they're not well attended by high school students. But that there is no ed code to support authorizers requiring for there to be a certain amount of synchronous learning offered.
And then we have another question regarding synchronous instruction. Must synchronous instruction be delivered by a credentialed teacher? Would watching a recorded video of a teacher qualify?
Yes, Ed Code states that synchronous learning needs to be delivered by a credentialed teacher. The credentialed teacher needs to be employed by the LEA. So, would watching a recorded video of a teacher qualify? No. To my understanding, it would not. But I can get back to you. We can look and make sure. Maybe if the teacher was employed by that particular LEA, but the idea is that the teacher and the student are interacting in real time, so I don't believe so.
Great. Those are all the Q&A questions we have so far. Keep dropping questions, and again, we'll be sending out a FAQ after this presentation along with the slides.
And I imagine there should be some question after this part. Let's see. How charter independent study average daily attendance is calculated. So, non-classroom based instructional time is evaluated by a certificated employee responsible for supervising the students' non-classroom based instruction. This is in Ed Code section 51747.5. And then daily engagement log is required for all non-classroom based instruction, and that's in CCR section 1196. And charter schools do not have a minimum day requirement. So the certificated teacher responsible for supervising the students' non-classroom based instruction determines if the total hours of non-classroom based instruction are equivalent to a day or days of instruction. So let's break this down a little bit. So the idea is that there is no particular minimum day requirement. So many non-classroom based charter schools are assigning a value to a work product of a school day. So if a student turns in something, the teacher looks at it and says, yes, I feel like this took the student, based on what I know about the student, their EL, they are have a learning disability. Based on what I know about the student, it took them 2 days to complete. I'm assigning 2 days of ADA to this work that they have completed. Now, it's not just about the assignment of this is how long I think it took the student to do. It's also about number 2, the daily engagement log. The student or the parent, depending on how old the student is, together, they are filling out a log that says each day that the student has engaged in an educational activity. Now, that is not super specific in ed code, and there is a lot of wobbliness about it, but generally, it's a calendar, and the student will indicate which days they participated in an educational activity. They sign the little box. Monday, I did schoolwork. Tuesday, I did schoolwork. Now, as long as the teacher says, I assign this work product 2 days, and the student has said, yes, I worked on 2 days, then they can claim 2 days of ADA. Now, if the student turns in 10 days worth of work, the teacher has evaluated and says, yes, this is worth 10 days. But the student never turns in a log or turns in a log that only has 1 day signed. Only 1 day of attendance can be claimed for ADA. So the calculation is 2 parts for non-classroom based charter schools. It's the teacher's determination of what the classroom work was worth in days, and the student saying, I participated in an educational activity today. That log is sometimes called a contemporaneous log, and it can be tracked several different ways. Pieces of paper on a calendar. Some schools just use the login that students have, a digital login. There are several different ways to do that. Sometimes the question comes up, can a student receive a day worth of ADA credits or multiple days worth of ADA credit for failing assignments? What do we think? Let's put it in the chat. If a student comes in and turns in a pile of work to you or to the teacher, can they receive ADA for that work? Yes, yes. People are saying yes. But it's crappy work. Are you sure? Yes. It's just like any other school that a kid turns in crappy work. He came to school that day and in a seat-based program. He came to school that day and his butt was in a seat, and they claimed attendance even though he turned in crappy work. It's the same thing for non-classroom based. If you turn the work in and you fail it, you still put effort, maybe not very much, but there is still something that is claimable there, and the teacher has to determine, okay, how much effort is this really worth? How is it worth a day? So, it's their judgment as their certificated teacher, how they know them. So there's, a balancing act there, and it's difficult to regulate. A judgment call. Okay.
We have a question in the chat. Are non-classroom based schools required to have a master agreement for each student? In other words, would a school that is all NCB need to establish master agreements for each student, or is this requirement just for independent studies programs?
Maybe I didn't hear the question. They're asking if all non-classroom based schools require master agreements for each student. Yes. Because if you're non-classroom based, the instruction modality would be less than 80% in a classroom. So that would be independent study. So you would need a master agreement for every student.
And then we had another question regarding credentialed teachers. If a charter is using a vendor using credentialed teachers to offer classes virtually via their school, is that considered employed by the LEA?
It's a little bit hard to hear you, Joanne, but I'm reading the question. No, that's a vendor. So they're still able to offer all of those courses, but it wouldn't necessarily count as their synchronous um, learning offering time. So they may have another time that they're offering synchronous learning with an actual employee of the LEA. Sarah, are you able to elaborate on that at all? Is there more information there? So if they are have a third party that's doing math and doing English, maybe the LEA is teaching social science, so that would count as their synchronous learning. Or maybe the LEA is just doing a mental health opportunity, so students can come in for 30 minutes during the day to meet all together for a mental health check-in.
You answered my question. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, where are we? Okay, so a little more monitoring of ADA. We're going to validate enrollment and attendance data. So we can compare numbers of P1, P2, and annual attendance reports for consistency and reasonableness. So are there large dips? Are there high areas, low areas? You can cross-reference enrollment counts with CalPADS data, sometimes using seabeds as the marker. Can look for red flags, unusually high enrollment relative to staffing. Like I talked about earlier, only having a few full-time teachers and growing to large numbers of students. Large spikes mid-year, and requesting student level attendance documentation for a random sample is a good way if you are concerned about attendance tracking to look and see how they're tracking their ADA. Mm. So monitoring
Any-
ADA, Zach?
Yeah, quick question,
Sure.
or I guess statement. One question that I seem to get quite often annually is with non-classroom based schools, you tend to see enrollment higher, or sorry, lower than what the P2 comes in at. And I
I have a whole slide for
got it.
that.
All right.
I'm trying to feed a little bit more information
No
first,
worries.
and then we'll get to that one. That was a great
Sounds good.
question, and I'll have you support me when we get to that slide. But okay, so monitoring ADA. Yes. Conduct meaningful site visits, review student files on site. So some of these will be entirely digital, but some will be physical files. You can look at the independent study agreement, you can download the policy and have the policy with you, compare it to the master agreement, making sure that all of the signatures are in place and that the classes that the students are in, the sample assignments are matching, that the same names that are in the master agreement appear on the assignments. And I mention all of these things just because there have been several fraud cases lately of schools making up students. If you look into the files, you can ensure that, okay, this master agreement belongs to these work samples of this student. This student is producing work for this LEA. Don't let the school pre-select the files. Just ask if you can go in and grab some, ask if you can have the password or sit next to them and choose some students at random. Interview teachers about their caseloads. Ask them how many students they have. They have 67 students. Okay, that's a red flag. You know what the caseloads should look like. Contact students. Talk to them about their school day. How often do you turn in assignments? What do they look like? What is your teacher asking of you? And the evaluation processes. Ask the student, what if you don't turn anything in? What happens then? Observe synchronous instruction sessions. We talked about that a little bit. Request real-time access to the learning management system. This will give you an idea of what students see from their end, how easy it is to access, where the synchronous learning opportunities are. Verify resource centers are operating as described in the charter. So if there are physical locations, go and visit them. Make sure that they are sites that serve students, not softball fields. Okay, next. Okay, ADA for non-classroom based with multiple tracks. And this is common that non-classroom based schools have multiple tracks. And if you're not familiar with this, unlike traditional schools, non-classroom based charters often run several different academic calendars in the same school year. So track A might run July to April. And then track B might run September to June. Track C will run from October to June. Am I on the right page here? So students are on different tracks, but they attend full school years, but at overlapping times. So basically, you can think of it like a hotel that has 100 rooms, but serves 120 different guests throughout a month because of turnover. The independent study charter school, the non-classroom based charter school, is similar. They might have a capacity, or their seabeds number is a certain number of students, but because they offer multiple attendance tracks with different schedules, the students come and go. So they disenroll and then new students enroll throughout the reporting period, and they can actually serve more students than their baseline number. So many non-classroom based schools are very transitory. So they are disenrolling and enrolling students throughout the entire school year on different tracks depending on when the student might enroll. So if a student enrolled in September, they would be enrolled onto the B track. If they enrolled later in the year in November, they would be enrolled onto the C track. Now, what my friend Zach was asking about is going to be on the next slide. Okay, my math challenged. Stick with me. This is difficult for everyone. It is really hard to see when non-classroom based charter schools have ADA that is greater than 100%. Everyone's like, oh, that's a red flag. That definitely means that something is wrong at that school. And unfortunately, that's not really what that means. It just means that we have a system that is not set up for non-classroom based multiple tracks. It just doesn't look right, because the way that we capture attendance is really stagnant. So we say from a census date this is the number we're going to use from CBEDS as a denominator. Oh, you are 1,000 students in your school program. And then as the school year goes on, students are absent here and there. And by the end of the year, you have 989 days over the 1,000 students that you enrolled. Now, you may have disenrolled a few and re-enrolled a few. A non-classroom based multiple track is completely different. They could disenroll and re-enroll hundreds of students over the term of the year. So this is some of the math that's going on here. The math behind the greater than 100% ADA. So ADA is the total days attended divided by the total days possible times the enrollment period percentage. So starting with your capacity expectation, or we're going to say your CBET, your census date number, we'll say 2,000 ADA. What actually happens is that the 2,000 students stable for the full year, that's going to be 1,800 ADA. They didn't attend every day. They're absent. They didn't collect everything. 600 students for one semester, 400 ADA. 500 students for a quarter, 200 ADA. 300 students for 6 to 8 weeks, 85 ADA. 100 students for 2 to 4 weeks, 25 ADA. So the total number of students served is 3,500 students, even though that CBEDS number started at 2,000. So the total ADA generated is 2,510. That's 139% ADA. So the school is literally providing more student days of education than a traditional school with stable enrollment, even though no single day exceeds the expected enrollment. How does everybody feel? Zach, do you want to help me?
You hit that pretty spot on. I mean, yeah, I've gotten questions from districts, just how is that possible? One piece of this I just kind of want to elaborate on though is as you kind of alluded to is how how do you get to that 2510 number is can sometimes be a real shot in the dark and I mean for budgeting purposes. That's what makes it very tough for non-classroom based schools, at least on the finance side, is say you're in a funding determination year and you have to meet 40 and 80% requirements, but you're continuously enrolling students and you don't really have that flat enrollment at CBEDS where it's going to say trend around 5 to 10% of that enrollment figure. Well, you could, like you said, you could go 39% over that figure. So trying to peg your P2 financials and your revenues, and then also tie that to your 40 and 80% spending requirements makes it very, very difficult, which just means as a non-classroom based administrator, you really need to work closely with your back office and stay really in tune with your ADA figures and your enrollment figures, keeping them up to date so you can ensure that 40 and 80 as you continue through the year and continue to enroll students past census day, that your revenues are really as close as they possibly can be. Sorry, I kind of took that a little further, but
No, that's fine. I mean, all of this is just to say that over 100% isn't necessarily a red flag that shenanigans is happening. Non-classroom based charter schools work within a lot of parameters, the 40%, the 80%, the the ADA piece, the teacher, a judgment and the contemporaneous log, ensuring that those meet. So there's a lot of parameters that they're working in. So although we have seen a lot of fraud and non-classroom based schools in the media, just know that this isn't always a red flag. This just sometimes does happen with multiple track non-classroom based charter schools, depending on how many students that they served in a particular year. Did we have one more question?
Yes, we have a question here. Does the auditor track or check this? And Scott checks the monthly 40 and 80%. Is that good or is more needed?
Yes, the auditor definitely does look at this. Um, you do check the 48, 80%. Yeah, that's great if you do that. Uh, I not all non-classroom based in between their funding determinations continue to follow the 40 and 80%, and nowhere in ed code currently is that required. So I don't know if you're would be able to hold them to it. If you can, that's great. But right now it does not say that. But yes, that I believe that was the intent. But many charters or non-classroom based end up only doing it for the for the determination year, and then don't worry about it again until the determination year comes again, and then make sure that their spending lines up. So good for you. Kudos if you're able to continue to track that. Okay, I think we're ready to go on now that we know everything about non-classroom based charter schools. Let's plop a petition on your desk and see what happens.
Thanks, Tiffany. Yeah, so we're going to review a few pieces for the non-classroom based new charter petitions. So in general, the initial petition process, it's primarily just like any other charter petition that you would receive. It's based on the information included in 47605. So chunks of the review for an initial petition are going to be exactly the same. So first, you'll receive the petition and the certification of completeness. That signed certification is what starts the timeline that's included in Education Code. The first timeline we're going to hit is the public hearing, which is required to be held within 60 days of receipt of that complete petition. And that public hearing is to consider the level of support for the petition. It's not required for the first hearing, but a lot of folks consider it to be a good practice to ensure that equal time for presentations is given during this first public hearing. And then next is the petition review. Just like any other petition, you're going to want to review the 15 required elements, the affirmations, the budget, all of those important pieces that go into a charter petition. We also suggest that you do a capacity interview with the petitioners. This is a best practice. I think it's widely done, even though it's not required, but this is a good way for you to get a feel for the petitioners and their background, what they actually know about running a K-12 school, and the prospects for it being a successful school. Next, you'll have to post your recommendation and recommended findings 15 days prior to the decision, the board meeting in which your board will make a decision on the charter petition. We've noted here that the decision hearing is within 30 days of that first public hearing. The statute actually says within 90 days of receipt of the petition. So that date that certification of completeness started, your decision date has to be within 90 days unless you agree to an extension with the petitioners. And this is the hearing that you must ensure that petitioners are given equivalent time or equal time and procedures for their presentations. So that's the meeting in which the decision is made. That's the important one to make sure that you have that equivalent time and procedures. If you deny the charter petition, petitioners do have appeal rights. They can appeal to the County Office of Ed, where they'd receive what's called a de novo review of the charter petition. And if the county office denies it, they have the right to appeal to the State Board of Education, which would review the appeal using an abuse of discretion framework. Next slide. So you'll want to look for some specifics related to non-classroom based petitions if you receive one of these. So that first slide it's pretty much the same as any other charter petition. Now you're going to start looking in the petition itself for non-classroom based items. You'll look for references specific to non-classroom based funding. You want to make sure they understand how that non-classroom based funding determination and process works that Tiffany and Rick talked about earlier. You'll want to look for a clear understanding of multi-track requirements, if applicable. Do they understand the maximum number of tracks, the minimum number of days per track, et cetera, all those things that were touched upon. You'll want to make sure that the petition includes the required independent study elements, items that Tiffany mentioned earlier, the time and work product, live interaction and synchronous learning, all those different pieces. You'll look for a clear understanding of how ADA is calculated through time value to ensure that petitioners understand that process. You would look for what safeguards are in place to ensure ADA compliance. Things like, do they have a data system that will help with tracking the compliance pieces? Is there a process for re-enrolling a prior student to make sure that they go into the same track and not into a different track? How will live interaction and synchronous learning be tracked? How will special education, EL, and services to other vulnerable populations be provided? And do they have a plan to provide meals? That is one of the pieces, just like a classroom-based program. Non-classroom-based programs are required to provide those meals for students. Next, location, location, location. As a result of AB 1507, beginning in 2020, new charter schools must be located within the boundaries of the authorizing school district or county office of education. So that was a more recent change. Non-classroom based charter schools are restricted from establishing resource centers outside the county of authorization. Charters operating outside of their boundaries before January 1, 2020 may continue until their charter is renewed. Upon renewal, the out-of-district sites must obtain written approval from the school district where they are located, or the charter must be authorized by that local school district. And there is a narrow exception that allows certain schools authorized by an adjacent district to serve specific populations, such as students on probation or formerly incarcerated individuals. And that takes us to the next section with Tiffany.
We do not have time for a breakout session. So we're going to move to lessons learned and possibly get to breakout towards the end. Julie asked an amazing question, and we're going to get to it. I want to answer it for sure live. So I'm going to go over some lessons learned really quickly, and then we will answer Julie's question. General oversight. Oversight responsibilities exist for all types of charter schools, including non-classroom based. Ed Code Section 47604.32. The petition is the roadmap for oversight. Whatever's in the petition is what we need to make sure is happening at the school. Ed Code Section 47604C ties an authorizer's liability to performance of oversight duties. So we need to make sure that we're doing those required oversight duties. There's lots of case study links here for you from the A3 debacle and also from the newer situation with Highlands. There are some articles there. And then CCAP 2025 study, Strengthening California's Charter School Sector, Updating Authorizer Functions and Funding, has a lot of other information as well. I suggest you looking into that. The failure to conduct oversight duties could make an authorizer liable for charter schools' actions. So understanding how the NCBs are funded and operate will help you to provide more effective oversight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Highlands Community Charter School and Charter and Technical Schools, the June 2025 state audit, because this is specifically about the oversight being overlooked. So $180+ million in questioned funding. State auditor found the school could not document eligibility for funds received, 177 million due to non-compliant instructional models, and 5 million from misreported attendance across all schools. Additional funding audits, evidence of wasteful spending, nepotistic hiring and contracting, improperly credentialed staff, and extremely poor academic outcomes, including graduation rates as low as 2.8%. Aftermath and reforms. The entire governing board resigned. State officials initiated efforts to recover funds. Legislators announced renewed interest in tightening oversight of non-classroom-based charter schools. The systematic lesson. Unlike cases involving intentional fraud, which was A3, where many of those bad actors were absolutely just trying to defraud the system and doing things that were illegal, Highlands illustrates how multiple levels of government can each consider oversight someone else's job. So this is really oh, I thought you were going to do that. Well, I thought you were going to do that. So there was a 2018 FitMac audit warning about mismanagement with the school district, but the school district continued to approve the renewals, and the county and CDE didn't take action at that point. So it just illustrates that there is ambiguity in California law about obligations and authorities for districts and counties and who holds who accountable. So it's really important that as authorizers, we are doing the oversight as the first step in ensuring that these non-classroom based schools are holding up their end of the bargain, following their petitions, and being fiscally responsible. Okay, some operational red flags. Charter management organizations, CMOs, controls virtually all operations. So third-party entities claiming vendor status to avoid transparency. If several charter school networks have arrangements where schools pay a chunk of their revenue to a separate corporation, which in turn provides virtually all of the school's operations, such as curriculum, financial management, enrollment services, and more. The CMO is hiding the information from the charter school boards, and then occasionally the schools don't know what the corporation is doing with their own money, and the school boards are not making their own decisions. And often the charter schools don't even realize that this is an unusual situation. They just think, oh, this is how it's always been. We give them all our money and they give us the curriculum and things that we need in order to operate. On the next slide, the excessive payments to related parties. Some charter schools have close ties with outside third-party organizations they're technically separate entities, but they collect large sums of money from the schools. Be wary of that. Be wary of loans between related schools and entities. Conflicts of interest, where there are contracts for services with family members of the LEA, collusion between vendors with close personal ties to charter leaders and or board members. Review those conflict of interest policies. Attendance and enrollment reporting red flags. Exponential or unexplained growth. Review the CBED's enrollment information. Request disenrollment information monthly. Rather than waiting till the end of the year with non-classroom based turnover, I would have your non-classroom based schools turning disenrollment information into you monthly. Review P1, P2, and end of year ADA reporting. Check for multi-track calendar manipulation, that students aren't being moved around on tracks and counted for attendance on several tracks. Enrollment without services, student transfers between related schools. And next, authorizer relationship red flags. Small district authorizers with disproportionate charter enrollment. This is something that has just recently come up, was recently the focus of an EdSource article. buffeted by change. California charter schools continue to grow amidst scrutiny. You can take a look at that for yourself. Financial incentives creating conflict calls into question if every small district has the knowledge and capacity to monitor complex operations. Do the oversight fees charged by the district go only to oversight activities? So making sure that your district is completing oversight activities for all your non-classroom based charter schools and providing all of that oversight that is necessary, no matter what your relationship is with the school. All right, I'm going to answer Julie's question. Julie says, how can an NCB school receive ADA for a student that enrolls in summer and returns to their traditional high school in the fall and spring where they receive ADA as well? It's a great question. It comes up all the time. Zach's already laughing. Okay. So this would probably be a non-classroom based school that has multiple tracks. And one of the tracks would start on July 1. That's the first day of the school year for this non-classroom based school, track A. They offer track A. So the student elects to enroll with this school, and they are there from July until the end of August. And I don't know what they complete. They complete a course while they're there, and they decide, I don't want to go to that school anymore. I'm going back to my traditional school. So while they're at the non-classroom based school, they collect 33 days of ADA. And the non-classroom based school claims the 33 days of ADA. Well, now they go on to their next school and continue to collect ADA at the next school. Our system does right now at the state does not have a shutoff valve once a student collects 175 or 180 or 185 days of ADA. So they can move from one school to another school, and the school would continue to get paid for that ADA, even if the student has attended more than 180 days of school. So it's the student and parents' choice if they want the student to attend more than 180 days of school. They've moved them from one school program to another one, and both schools get paid for that time that they were educating students. Julie, did you want to come off mute and talk about that for a minute? I know it comes up all the time.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Is there legislation to curtail that? Because there's like some networks making significant amount of revenue just for doing that.
Right. I think it's a tricky subject for a lot of reasons. Are the students going to these other networks because the classes are not available in that district or county for them to take during the summer? Like, if the state shut that down and didn't allow the non-classroom based schools to serve those students, would they be served otherwise? So that's one way. Another thing to think about is, at what point do you cut it off? Because right now it would be a situation where they could say, okay, every student only gets 182 days of education. So wherever the student started, July 1, they might run out of days in April at their district school because they moved around to schools. And now what happens to the student? Do they stop going to school in April? Will the district not serve them anymore? I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know what the solution is, and I haven't seen any legislation that suggests that there is a solution forthcoming anytime soon. Has anybody else seen anything? Mr. Indra?
Hello. Um, I did want to add to this, that one of the things that came out of the A3 case, I think, was that schools cannot market their program that way. So I think you've heard Tiffany
Correct.
talked really a lot about, like the parent's choice, if the parent is choosing to bring them and go
Yes.
back. So, that's where that can happen. But I think
That
schools
is
where you're
that
seeing
is
this happen
also
a lot, you check their marketing because they're not allowed to market it that way.
and they're required to offer the full year. So if they have a track A and the student returns to them at some point, they have to take that student back and they have to return to the track A. So they have to have that full year, the full 175 days offered. So they can't just only have an 8-week program, it has to be a full 175 days. So yes, that's a good point, Andrea. They cannot pass out flyers saying they have a summer only program. They can't pass out flyers, or they can't have anything on the website that says summer school, because it should be a full year program.
Thank you for explaining that. And Tiffany, I appreciate the going back to school choice, because if the student chooses that, and then if we did put a set amount of time, then that would restrict them to make a choice. Like, hey, I want to go back to the district. Well, then I'd be cut off. So thank you for explaining that.
Right. No, I know there's a lot of kind of strange things about it, so I'm not sure how we'll navigate that, but definitely is out there. I know Tom has a couple announcements. I'm gonna have him do his slides and then I'll take more questions. Sound good?
And if you have to leave early, I dropped a link to the feedback survey. Please complete that. It's super short and helps us tremendously with planning for these. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I'll make this quick, subject to the rule that we have to read all the words. But just an announcement that, and some of you may have seen it if you get CCAP's alerts, and if you don't, go to our website and sign up for them because they're free, and we get information out. But CCAP has been funded by federal charter school program grants. That's the same funding that is how CASI is funded in through the department. We have the latest one we have is a 5-year grant that we've done under the aegis of the National Network for District Authorizing. That's an umbrella group that CCAP and our state counterparts and some other states set up for organizations like ours that serve district authorizers. And this grant is not like the last ones, which were all about authorizer support. This one is to develop and disseminate best practice tools that strengthen innovative charter school models that are designed and how they're designed, authorized, and replicated. And our model of this, there's other models out there across the country, and I think CCSA actually is another entity that got one of these grants. Ours really has an authorizer lens to it, where we said if we were to foster the development of innovative school models, could we do it in a way that addressed on the front end what authorizers might be concerned about or worried about or interested in to make it kind of a cross-sector collaborative opportunity. So the next slide. These are the goals and primary activities of this grant. We want to improve the success of innovative model developers and operators with sharing well-tested resources and best practices. But importantly, again, we have an authorizer lens. We want to improve authorizers' capacity to implement best practices uh, in order to further state policy in their own state policy context, and that appropriately evaluate and support innovative charter school models, the petitions, and then the performance of the schools. And along the way, we want to strengthen the authorizer technical assistance infrastructure so that the model developers, the charter petitioners, and the schools facing renewal are judged through the best practices that we have in authorizing. The next slide. So, as a practical matter, what does this look like? Well, our goal is to identify some innovative models in which authorizers, operators, and other stakeholders would be interested, but then collaborate to identify and address authorizer concerns on the front end of things and be able to share that knowledge across the sector. So our first priority model, just in light of today's topic and the lifting of the moratorium, we couldn't not make it non-classroom based schools in all their varieties. And we've heard the definitions of the range of schools that can fall within the definition currently. But there's also other models, like there's some people standing up dependent versions of their charter school and that kind of thing. We want to address all of those. An important caveat is By doing this, CCAP is not promoting these models, but we are recognizing there's a demand not only on the part of operators interested in new schools, but also among parents and families. But there are significant concerns that we've all been reading about, and some of which we've flagged in today's session about the academic performance, about some of the equity questions, and about the fiscal integrity questions. So, how can we help the sector as a whole get out ahead of that now that we're past the moratorium? The next slide. So right now at this stage, the way we're starting off is we'd like to we're going to be setting up a working group to meet quarterly starting this spring with some kind of homework in between. But it's going to be a cross-sector group. We're going to have charter operators and organizations and others in it too. But we want to start that process by recruiting an authorizer, kind of cohort of people who want to roll up their sleeves and be part of this discussion. We're looking for district and county authorizers. We're looking for large and small authorizers. We're looking at current and maybe even just potential authorizers of, of non-classroom based schools who want to maybe get out ahead of things because they're anticipating a petition coming their way. So, and then after we sort of get the authorizer group together, we're going to be identifying other partners throughout the sector. So I just leave you, if you're at all interested, just contact CCAP. Our email is there. You can find us online or reach out to me or just reach out to the CCAP and I'll get the information. And if you just want to know more, you're not sure you want to sign up, but you want to know more, just reach out to us. And if you're not getting our alerts, sign up for those because we'll also repeat the information there. Thanks very much, Tiffany.
All right, I think Tiffany is answering a few more questions in the Q&A. If you have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. Again, we are compiling a FAQ to send out as a resource with all of these questions after this session. We do have some upcoming
We can't hear you, Joanne.
Oh.
Go ahead, try again.
Okay. We have the April quarterly training, which is coming up.
Nope, I'll do it. I don't think. Can you guys hear her or no? I couldn't. No. Okay. Okay. So we have the April quarterly training, Friday, April 17th, 2026, 9 to 11. The topic will be Road to Renewal. Upcoming charter chats, one on February 25th, 2026, 10 to 11 a.m., March 25th, 2026, 10 to 11 a.m., and April 29th, 2026, 10 to 11 a.m. And there is more information and registration at this link. You can always go to the CDE webpage too, just type in CASI and it will bring up all this information, including all of the resources as well. And then next is our CASI mentoring program. We have lots of mentees that we've been working with. We would also like some people that are interested in being mentors. If you don't feel like you could mentor in every area, that's okay. If you feel like you might be an expert in non-classroom based or expert in dependent charter schools, that would be fantastic. Please fill out this survey and help us. We will contact you to be a mentor, maybe just in a specific area, maybe in every area. Either way, we would be happy to have you. And lastly, thank you very much for attending. Please fill out the survey. It's helpful for us to know what we should cover, what we can do better, how we can help you out. We are going to stay on for a few more minutes, so you can stay and ask your questions if you'd like to. Scott, I am looking at, Scott is asking if he is using the checklist from FitMac for new charters. Does it include all of these items? I'm guessing you're speaking specifically about the non-classroom based items. I don't believe so, but I'm trying to bring it up right now and I'll let you know. But anybody else that has questions, feel free to drop that in the Q&A, or you can stay on and I'll be happy to answer those right now. Thank you so much. I had such a lovely time. Happy Friday.